Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. This panel is on denialism, and this is something that we all face. Yes, you have to stop talking now. Stop talking. Don't make me yell. Okay, you're getting better, getting better. That's good, that's good, yep. Okay. This is a panel on denialism. It's something that you've been hearing a lot of. It's something that so many of us experience on a day-to-day basis. My name is Kamloops Indian Band. I am Tanya Talaga. I'm from Fort William First Nation. That's my nation. I live in Toronto though. Born and raised. I'm an author and a journalist, and I'm very grateful to see all of the survivors, the witnesses, the elders in this room, the intergenerational survivors, and we are so very grateful to Kimberly Murray for her relentless work that she does with all of her heart and all of her spirit. We hold our hands up to you, my dear friend. Yes. We can give Kim so much love. She needs it, right? She needs it. And before I begin introducing my incredible panel today, I wanted to give a little bit of a plug for the Tikanagan exhibit. You see these beautiful Tikanagans that are up here at the front? There are 260 Tikanagans that are here in the hotel on display, and they are from all over. They've been collected by women actually from Thunder Bay, and from Fort William First Nation. My friend Jolene Banning drove down here with Marlene Pierre and Louise and everyone, and Cree. It's just wonderful, all of the things that you've brought with us to show us. Go visit. So go down the hall, turn left, and then hang a right. You'll see a giant sign. The Tikanagans are in that room. They're here until the end of today. Again, there are 260 of them, and they've been lovingly collected and held by the cradleboard carriers that are here with us. Okay, so we are talking about denialism. And with me, I have three incredible speakers. But before I introduce them, I would like to talk a little bit about what denialism means. And I was lucky to have a chance to read the chapter that Kim wrote on denialism before we received everything yesterday. And there are so many things in this chapter in particular that I hope that you take to heart, that I hope that you read, and I hope that we all act on. You know, Kim says this all the time, and it is so true. The state has a responsibility to both victims of human rights violations and to the public to educate citizens around these historical and continuing injustices. Denialism is not ours to handle. It is Canada's, it is the church's, it is all non-Indigenous people, it is allies. We need them to stand up with us. It is under international law, Canada must comply with its own laws, live up to UNDRIP, and combat the denialism that it helped create. She said that denialists should not be dismissed as a harmless fringe phenomena because it threatens the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. How? Because denialists don't just deny the school existed, they deny the outcomes, the intent, and the impact. Denialists deny facts, attack the credibility of victims, and in a psychotic twist, portray victims as oppressive perpetrators while characterizing themselves as the actual victims. As Kim's report lays out, there are usually 5 common myths to denialism. The first one is the harms of the Indian residential school system have been overstated and the positive aspects downplayed. That's myth number 1, and how many times have we heard that? Number 2, the experiences at Indian residential school, including deaths, were typical for the time period. Number 3, there are no unmarked burials or mass graves at Indian residential schools. Number 4, there is a conspiracy to exaggerate deaths at Indian residential schools to push a political agenda and to enrich Indigenous leadership. And number 5 is, of course, what transpired at Indian residential school does not amount to a genocide. These are all of the things we hear constantly, and every person in this room and the panel I'm going to introduce to you, we all have had personal experience with this. And as Kim said in her report, she has received hundreds of emails constantly from people, thousands, from people that deny, that attack, and choose to ignore Canada's truth. And all of us, as I said on the stage, have our own experiences with denialism and bring our own perspectives to it. I'm going to introduce you to my panel that we've got up here now. The woman that is sitting to me here on my left, this beautiful warrior, Kukpi Rosanne Casimir from Kamloops Indian. Yeah. You all know her, you know. She has so much experience in community. She has experience in politics. She's been given a course, let me tell you, in what Canada really truly looks like. She knows politics at the municipal, the provincial, and the federal levels. She has brought to light the horrific truths of the Lestwewe, the missing. That's the term that the community prefers than the number, the 215 potential unmarked burials that have been discovered at the Kamloops Indian Residential School site. She also amplifies the need for Canada to reflect on our true history from all the work that she's done. She knows that real action and change are needed to support healing. And together, through unity, we will rebuild and we will heal our communities. We will redefine our paths and create widespread change. Thank you very much, Kukpi. Also, sitting in the middle is an incredible ally that some of you may know very much from social media, if you don't know him personally. Dr. Sean Carleton is a settler historian and associate professor of history and Indigenous studies at the University of Manitoba. His research examines the history of schooling and settler colonialism in British Columbia. He is the author of the award-winning book, Lessons in Legitimacy, Colonialism, Capitalism, and the Rise of State Schooling in BC, and he serves as a historical consultant for the Squamish Nation Usnawas Project, which investigates the history and legacy of St. Paul's Indian Residential School in North Vancouver, BC. And our last guest is Ben Roswell. Ben is the founder of the Remembering Project, a movement of non-Indigenous Canadians who acknowledge our collective responsibility for the harm caused by the Indian residential school system. Ben previously served as president of the Canadian International Council. He was Canada's ambassador to Venezuela, representative in Canada in Kandahar, and the Charge d'Affaires to Iraq, and co-founder of the civic technology startup Better Place. I'm going to start by asking our panelists to define what denialism means to each of them. And with that, I'm going to start with Kukpi.
Check, check. Check, check. So likewise, could be Rosanne Casimir, the columnist of Schwetmuk. Very honored to be here, and thank you for that first question. What is denialism, and what does it mean to me? Well, denialism, firsthand, it is denying what has happened. It is denying the truths of our elders. It's denying the truths of the impacts of Indian residential school. It's denying the truth that those events happened. It was real. Those traumas, those were real. And, the things that are said and done, the propaganda that is also out there, is hurtful. And to me, it is a crime. And it is horrific because, for one, our elders and our survivors are finally being heard in this pivotal historical time. To be able to share those truths in a safe way and to be able to do that provides meaningful steps towards healing. So denialism, I'm going to be addressing it a bit more in the next question, but it's denying the events. It's denying what happened.
Yes, thanks so much for creating space at the gathering today to talk about this important topic. And I think, for me, residential school denialism is an attack on truth and reconciliation. It is an attempt to downplay and twist and misrepresent survivor truth. I think denialists understand the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's formula very clearly, right? First, we need truth. Truth will lead to healing and justice. Healing and justice will lead to reconciliation. Denialists know this, and so they're trying to keep us stuck in the truth part, right? They're downplaying these truths to close off the avenues to healing and justice and reconciliation. And I think in this way, we need to understand residential school denialism as a form of genocide denial, right? Academically, the field of genocide studies talks about denial as the final stage of a genocide. And I think that for many of us, whether we're talking about community work, whether we're talking about the denialism that we see in different industries, it all has that common characteristic of trying to undermine public trust in truth and reconciliation work, to keep us stuck in the colonial cul-de-sac. And that's why holding space for truth before reconciliation is such an important part of the work that we're all doing in different ways. That's what it means to me.
Miigwech. Ben?
Ani Boujou. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this important panel, and greetings to all my relations. I hope that we can earn that relationship if we do our work correctly as non-Indigenous Canadians. For me, denialism, I make the distinction between denialism and denial. Denialism is the intentional spreading of false truths, there's specific propaganda and other tactics to try and convince other people, the larger population, to deny. So denialism is one phenomenon, and the denials themselves. The reason I make that distinction is it creates two audiences to address. One of them are criminals, and in her work, Kimberly Murray, I think, has sketched out some serious and very necessary measures to deal with the criminal act of spreading falsehoods about something so harmful. But the other audience are a large group of Canadians that aren't trying to convince anyone else to deny, but are having difficulty accepting it. There was really worrisome research that came out in 2022 from the Reconciliation Barometer that said that because of the revelations of residential school burials and the remarkable national reckoning that came from the courageous work of Cookpick, Rosanne, and others, 95% of Canadians now know about residential schools. So it's virtual all Canadians, but only 22% believe that they were set up with the intention to harm Indigenous peoples. And that's a massive gap between 22% who accept that they were genocidal in nature and 95% who know that they existed. And so that's the audience that our work is focused on. How do we encourage Canadians not to deny, but to accept the truth?
Miigwech. I'm going to ask Kukpi Rosanne Casimir to give us an overview of what denialism has meant to your community. I mean, Kamloops has been at the forefront. You have been leading the way ever since the spirits of the Lestway Way came forward and got us all to motivate into action. And I know that it has been incredibly difficult on your community, the backlash. And if you could talk to us about how your community has dealt with it, what you've experienced, I would appreciate that.
Excellent. I'm going to stand up, and I kind of like to stand up and get down because I'm still on a bit of a healing journey myself physically, so it just helps that as well. But I wanted to share very much with you. I always like to take a deep breath before I get started. It just helps to calm my nerves, but also to help relax how I'm feeling. Because this is very much, very deep, very hard work. And, I know that, I wanted to acknowledge our survivors that are here in this room. Acknowledge the intergenerational survivors that are also here. Acknowledge all of you for the work that you're doing with your communities. And also acknowledging those that have joined us through the live stream. For me, I know that whether you're here or live streaming, that there is cultural support that is in place. Because when we talk about denialism and the impact that it has had, I know that our community has been definitely in that realm, and also our team that works with us. I just wanted to, share that because it is your truths that we're also standing up today and yesterday, but it's also going to be tomorrow until we find peace. It is your truth that is going to help guide the investigations for the missing, and is also going to be helping to ensure justice. And when we look at defining denialism, it is from a firsthand experience as a community that is a caretaker of an Indian residential school directly within our reserve. It is also about seeking justice for the missing from the Kamloops Indian Residential School. We have over 100 survivors among our membership, and that's with the Kamloops alone. And we know that there's been many throughout Shwetmagulu directly, but also neighboring nations, as well as many First Nation communities throughout British Columbia. The term denialism does not adequately reflect the hurt and the harm that it has caused. Simply put, it is really, truly based on hate, and it really does have a lot of real repercussions. We've all faced that, we've all seen it, we've all heard it, we've all experienced it. But most importantly, our survivors and our intergenerational survivors have been directly impacted from that. 1-2-15, as we are gonna call the squeak way, because just like in the presentation we heard yesterday from one of our elder speakers and survivors, was they were given a number, and that's who they were known. So for us, when we reflected and working with our grassroots and our elders from our community, Le Squeakway was the missing. And that's the meaning behind that. So at that time, we had no communication plan, no plans on, the moving forward. But it was traumatizing for the families, it was traumatizing for the community members, and all those that work for the band, and also for leadership, and our families, but also our community members. People wanted to come and support, and that's that allyship. People were traumatized and grieving. As Kalmuch, we come together and we grieve together. And media, they wanted to know more. In our community, we also seen others that wanted to see more and know more. They were uninvited in a disrespectful manner. showing up with drones that were seen, and many wanted to take pictures of the site. And some even wanted to come up onto the shores of the riverbanks and come up and access the grounds, our sacred grounds. And some people said that they wanted to have, and they believed that they had a right to inform people and that they represented the people. And to me, that was so wrong because, for one, they weren't welcomed, they didn't come to us respectfully, and they came in assuming that they had some kind of a right, but they were on our lands. They were disrespecting the work, they were disrespecting the unmarked graves, they were disrespecting our survivors, they were disrespecting our people. And yes, it was shared with me that security also had to stop people from showing up. There was a couple that showed up in the middle of the night with shovels. And, we were horrified by that. And that was, to me, discriminatory. That was impactful. It's hard to describe the words for that one. So when people first started, the GPR, we put up a fence. We wanted to protect, and we didn't want people to be walking on, over the potential sites of unmarked graves. So immediately, our team hired security 24/7 to protect those grounds. And we also had to protect our church. We had our church, too, that was also vandalized. And it was our people that came immediately to take the graffiti that was plastered all over there by denialists, people that didn't believe the truths of our survivors. So to have people do something like this was clearly the need to share and inform people in a way that gave understanding, because there was clearly the unintended fallout and the trauma of the truths. And, we need to find more answers in those truths, but be able to support this very important piece, and that is to educate others, educate the denialists, and also educate them on who we are as Kamloops, as First Nations, Indigenous peoples, educating them on our cultural values, our protocols, and our practices. It is also details how the denialists attacked the community on social media, what impact, that had. Denialists attacked the community on social media, and for me, personally, it was very crushing because it targeted our survivors, it targeted our people. And, even myself, I was approached with phones directly in my face, recording and throwing questions one after the other, looking for, a response that they wanted to take and run. To me, that was very disrespectful and so distasteful, and definitely not the type of media that we wanted within our community. We know that, as clearly as displayed through so many of those actions, it is also a display of racism, and it is also hateful and hurtful, and showed on so many different fronts through that process of denialism. And my hope is that something is done on all those fronts. And when it comes to the toxicity of denialism on social media, that has to be changed too. And my concern is for my survivors and those who were directly impacted, also by reading in different outlets, whether it's social media, whether through its written literature, about horribly negative statements and remarks, or potentially saying that the Indian residential school and the impacts were not happening. Our survivors, they carried those truths, and they lived in that pain, and that trauma is still felt today. So to continue moving forward and steps towards justice and steps towards truth and reconciliation and supporting our survivors and our healing journeys and assisting to seek that justice is the forum that allows our survivors to find peace. And so many things that media needs to do better. It is important to have public confidence regarding the schools in relation to the deaths of the disappearances of children and who and the ones that did not come home, and the families that it impacted directly. We need to work with the media to also educate and to support public awareness in a way that respects survivors and those who have been devastated from the impacts. And also one that supports the public in ways for understanding how to support survivors. I think that is extremely key. That would be a positive approach to ensure that they follow those processes. What media can do better is also be ethical and fact-based and trauma-informed and respect survivors' truths and ensuring that there's cultural supports in place for them, but also mental health supports as well. And, you know, I just hold my hands to those that are here, those that are listening, and those who are triggered, because it's so important that through all those outlets, and even in here, that you feel supported, protected, honored for those that the information impacts. So from a caretaker community, these are some of the impacts that the Kamloops has faced and have been a brunt of. And, you know, I know that if it wasn't for, you know, our survivors in our community and for, you know, the impacts that it has had, it does take a lot of leadership and support from past and current leadership, but also leadership within departments and within the community to help support and work with our survivors to move forward in this way. And so, you know, I too also want to extend my gratitude for Kimberly Murray being the independent interlocutor, for all the amazing work that she's done, you know, hearing from all of us right across Turtle Island, coming to our communities directly, but working with us to hear how and what needs to be changed to be able to provide and find peace for our survivors, and looking at all the different legal processes as well as we move forward. Cook's Jam.
Kim pointed out in her report, denialism is a uniquely non-Indigenous problem, and addressing it is going to take a multifaceted legal, policy, and public education approach. So Sean, our academic here, our warrior on social media, how do you identify denialism?
Well, I think Ben made a really important distinction in his opening comments of trying to tease apart, you know, denialists who are doing this deliberately as a part of that strategy that I talked about of undermining truth, of attacking reconciliation, but also understanding that there are people who are not creating necessarily this content, but are consuming it, that they find it alluring for a variety of different reasons, and as a result are spreading it, not just on social media, but in their interpersonal relationships at the dinner table, in the hockey dressing room, in their community-based groups. So because of that, it makes identifying denialism sometimes difficult. Obviously, what Cookby was talking about, people showing up, those very obvious attacks or saying harmful and hurtful things on social media are easier to understand. It can be more difficult to identify the denialism in those interpersonal relationships where someone might introduce a denialist talking point that they've heard, that they're questioning a certain truth. It can sometimes look like curiosity, but in reality, it's a learned behavior of avoidance on many of these issues, as Ben was pointing out, a reluctance to accept as a form of self-preservation. A lot of this is that people, non-Indigenous people, are feeling uncomfortable by the truths of survivors. They feel implicated in the process of genocide, which they are. And so as a result, they find comfort in denialism. And so I think, again, that makes it difficult, but the talking points, one of the things that Kim's report does very well is lay out the common talking points, that it's a playbook, many of the things that denialists say are not original. And they are also not necessarily unique only to the context of Canada. They are the ways in which others have justified genocides and downplayed other genocides in different contexts. And the more that we learn how to identify that and see the pattern, the more effective we can intervene, we can discredit, we can hold space for survivor truth, and find ways to continue to move forward and take care of not only survivors, but also bring non-Indigenous Canadians. We can bridge that gap that you identified, Ben, between those who are now aware of the system and those who are still reluctant to understand its ongoing harms. So I think there are a variety of strategies, as you mentioned, from education being a key component, media training as another, community work of bridging the gap in many of our communities, and inviting non-Indigenous Canadians in particular to understand and accept the truths in the chapter on denialism, right? Finding ways to teach people about these issues. So inviting them into the process of learning how to identify denialism, not as good questions, not as intellectual curiosity, but part as this very disrespectful attempt at undermining the truths of survivors to protect the colonial status quo. The more that we can invite people into that process, the more space we will be able to create for truth to win the day.
I'm curious, to me it seems like things are just getting worse and worse. Is that everyone else's feeling? Like, do you feel like that, Sean? I mean, you're out there quite a bit on social media. I see you're constantly beating back these folks. And what's going on? Is it this there seems to be a rise of hate towards our people?
I mean, if we look just only at the case of British Columbia, in the last number of years, we've seen, I think it's fair to say that residential school denialism is on the rise. Just in the community of Squamish, the memorial to the St. Paul's Indian Residential School has been vandalized a number of times. We've seen a very angry man drive his truck through a march of survivors in British Columbia. I mean, we've seen politicians downplay survivor truths. It certainly seems like it is on the rise. But at the same time, I think it's important to acknowledge that those who are creating denialist content are a small handful of people. It's the same, people that you will be familiar with, who used academic platforms to foment anti-Indigenous hatred a decade ago about taxes and policy and the so-called Indian industry, have moved on to use their platform now to talk about residential school denialism. And so I think residential school denialism is appealing to a lot of people because it's providing comfort to them in an unsettling time. But I think we do risk thinking that there are more people out there really than there are. And that's why it's so important to intervene in the conversation in this moment. Like, we have an opportunity, thanks to Kim's report, to identify what this issue is and to think meaningfully about strategies to combat it in this moment. And so I think, this is a really great opportunity to not only have this conversation today, but to continue to build these conversations and relationships to figure out what strategies can we implement now to stop the growth of denialism outside of this small closed circuit of mostly right-wing pundits. And so I think, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm both dispirited by the denialism that I encounter on a daily basis, but I'm also hopeful that because we can put language to this and have meaningful conversations about what we can do about it, that denialists will have a diminishing population of people who will believe them, because we're bridging that gap based on the number of initiatives that we can put in place.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. Ben, you have been a Canadian diplomat. You have worked for the state. And do you feel it's your responsibility to help now?
I do think it's the responsibility, ultimately, of all non-Indigenous Canadians to acknowledge. To acknowledge the harm that was done in our name. Whether or not we had a direct role or not, I think is an irrelevant distraction that I think a lot of Canadians kind of go down that path. The reality is that Canada was constructed through residential schools as one of many nation-building tools, and so the nation that we've inherited, the one we feel connected to now, the country we love, was built through harming hundreds of thousands of children. That's a difficult reality to accept, but I do think that particularly those of us that have benefited from Canada in its current form have that responsibility. The way I describe it to friends and colleagues, I love my country. I represented Canada. I was an ambassador of Canada. I had those conversations on human rights that Natano Bed talked about just a few minutes ago about how we can advance human rights based on our experiences in Canada. But thanks to the leadership of people in this room, thanks to the survivors, starting with the class action lawsuits in the 90s and 2000s, thanks to forcing a prime minister to apologize, the National Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, the courageous work of Rosanne Casimir and all the other committees searching for survivors, for graves in the various grounds, and then now thanks to this historic report of Kimberly Murray, Canada is changing. It's changing in response to the growing understanding that we committed genocide. And that acknowledgement changes a country. It has to. You can't hold both of those thoughts in your head at the same time, that loving your country and knowing that it committed genocide. So the way that I would describe the dynamic is that Canada is in an identity crisis. The identity of Canada has to evolve. Some Canadians respond with grief, which I think is the natural human response, but others with denial. And I think we probably will have many, many years of this to come. This identity crisis is likely to grow because the nature of Canada that exists because of the creation, because of the residential schools, the structures that Canada, that define Canada now have to change. And that is a very, very long process. So that battle will grow, and my view is that we have to join that battle by, in our case, among non-Indigenous Canadians, encouraging more to adopt grief as their response and not denial, and certainly for us no longer to be bystanders.
Miigwech. Yeah, well said. Well said. Kukpi, tell me, what are you doing? What is your community doing to protect survivors? What, if you could give us specifics on how you are sort of holding them close and trying to protect them from all of the hate that is out there?
Thank you for that question, Tanya. That is a really important one because, like I said at the beginning, and like we all agree, and like what we've also heard, is this is heart work. And, this is very, very important to be able to nurture our survivors, our intergenerational survivors, but also to give hope for our future generations. But it's also about, keeping our survivors, our team, and our technical experts, but also keeping them safe and making them feel like they're in a safe place and space because of how hurtful and harmful, the toxicity is out there. For our survivors, it's, given the lies that, is perpetuated. We do our best to make sure that our survivors are reached out to regularly. And our team at the Kamloops does an excellent job of that. They reach out with them all the time, they connect, but they also support them. and, and staring down those lies too. Are keeping the current resting place also sacred and from harm, and from, those that were they're trespassing and doing illegal access. So we have the security in place. So we've dealt with them showing up. So I know that with the security in place, they protect the grounds. We have them dedicated 24/7, and that's extremely important, and making sure that site-specific work is also in place. We provide no details when we have, some of the events that also occur, just to protect our people, and making sure that only those that are invited are participating. We also have regularly scheduled ceremonies that take place as well. Whether it's seasonally solstice ceremonies, keeping our team grounded is essential. There's weekly drumming and singing, for the staff, but also for the unmarked graves, and, ensuring that grounding is taking place at every single level. And leadership also participates as well to be able to support that as well. There's also regularly spiritual cleanses that also take place. And whether it's through sweats and water ceremonies, it's really important for that grounding. And to feel connected, but also to feel connected to each other, but also to have that place where you're working from the inside, from your pusman, your hearts, but also connecting with the Creator to give you that strength and that courage, but also to support, that moving forward. And also with communications, just like what I shared in the first question, the importance of having a strategic communication plan because of the types of questions, that could come forth. And it's about having, that also protecting your people, but also protecting, the people that are being interviewed. Because if it's not leadership, it's your survivors.
Miigwech. Hashem. So we've talked a lot about what it looks like, how hateful this and harmful this speech is, these actions are. But Sean, I want to ask you, and I'm deviating from the script a little bit here, but I wanted to ask you, what tools would you suggest that we can use to combat denialism when we're faced with it?
The most important question, how do we deal with this? I mean, I'm still digesting Kim's report. I was furiously reading as much as possible yesterday and this morning, and I think there are a lot of concrete solutions here. There are many different tools on the table. I know Leah Gazan last night was also talking about legislative tools. There are many different ways that this can be combated. I guess from my position as an educator, I try and think of education as one of the key ways that we can bridge this gap. Murray Sinclair always says that education is what got us into this mess. Education is what's going to get us out. That's sort of one of the core guiding principles that I use in my work, because I see this on a day-to-day basis, where people come into my classroom, as an example, knowing very little about the history of these lands, about the history of colonization, of policies like residential schools, and come out after 13 or 14 weeks feeling more informed, but also empowered to figure out how they can make a positive difference in the world by taking action on these truths, of figuring out in whatever way they move through the world to create that positivity. And I really truly believe that much of the allure of denialism, right? Like, why is denialism so alluring? It's because we still have an educational gap in this country. We have 95% of people now who are aware of residential schools, but have a very surface level understanding of them and the truths. I hear many of the myths that Kim has identified in her report that denialists propagate are debunked in the Truth and Reconciliation Report, even just in the summary. You don't need to read all 6 volumes to understand that this was not a well-intentioned system. That there were no deaths or that deaths were unavoidable. Like all of these myths have long-standing, have been debunked for a long time. And so what that tells me is that people are aware, but they don't know the full impacts of the truth, that is an education gap. And so for me, the tool that is going to be most effective is ensuring that to bridge that gap, so that when a denialist talking point comes up, Canadians feel empowered to challenge it, right? That when someone says, but residential schools were really well-intentioned, or maybe we should focus on the positives, that's seen as like the new denying gravity, or that that the earth is flat, right? Because people understand the truth to such a point. They're not just aware of it, but they understand it in such a deep way that they are able to respond it and call that out. That we don't wait for some of the other tools to do the work. That on an everyday level, Canadians feel empowered by the truth. They've moved from the grief to the understanding of this is a responsibility I have to hold, to create a better world for all of us and all of our relations. So for me, the education tool is so powerful because it brings everybody into the conversation. It doesn't delay the power and responsibility to representatives. It is something that everybody can take action on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very well said. And I know that's, as you referenced Murray Sinclair, he always says education got us into this mess, and it'll be education that will lead us out of it. And I'm thinking about Murray. I know we all are right now as he's in hospital. Ben, this conversation about denialism is really a conversation about the rejection of genocide. This shows really that Canada still are a majority, or the Canadians are still not ready to accept the word genocide. And so what can we do to convince the majority to accept that Canada committed genocide?
Thanks for the question. Let me talk about another tool to build on what Sean has explained, the central role of education, and that's memory activism or memory culture, also well documented in Kimberly's report. Memory activism invites non-Indigenous Canadians first to start with an acknowledgement of the truth. I would say if you have to kind of compare it with education, it might work more with the heart than with the head. And that's why memory activism often begins with acts of commemoration or memorialization and invites non-Indigenous Canadians into that process so that the truth can get through. If the thinking brain is kind of creating problems, that you're getting through the heart. We start with every volunteer in our project, the Remembering Project, has to sign an acknowledgement that Canadians bear collective responsibility for the legacy of residential schools. And what we've observed is that when Canadians really do acknowledge, really accept, like when the pin drops about what our predecessors attempted to do with these schools, it doesn't stop there. It can't stop there. You get that same kind of cognitive dissonance. Grief, as I mentioned, is a healthy response to that. But we also find that many Canadians feel that the urge to act, like once you recognize that your country has committed genocide, you can't just go on with your life like as before, as if nothing happened. There's this like anxiety to do something, and most Canadians don't know what to do. They do their land acknowledgements at their meetings, and they'll wear an orange shirt on September 30th. But many non-Indigenous Canadians feel that they need to do something else. They don't know Indigenous people, perhaps, so they don't really know what's appropriate. So memory activism, in our case, offers an opportunity, bit by bit, information, like data point by data point, to build the truth together, to follow the leadership of survivor committees as they're trying to uncover the truth of what happened in the residential school that they're focused on. There's usually a massive workload. There's usually a lot of kind of drudgery work like data entry or looking up archives or what have you. and our non-Indigenous volunteers then contribute that non-expert work so that they have something tangible that they can do, very much following the leadership of Indigenous people. And in that way, you actually end up having a collaborative activity that we're doing together, non-Indigenous and Indigenous, both trying to uncover the truth. And in the process, we've noticed some wonderful relationships emerge from that work.
That's so good to hear, because it's all about relationship building, as my elders always tell me, right? It's all about relationships. And speaking of, and then before we get to the to questions, I actually want to leave the last word with you, Kukpi, because I want to ask you about hope. Where is the hope? Where do we go forward from here?
Hope is definitely something that is in the future. It is something that we as mothers, grandmothers, aunties, godmothers, and we need for our children. And it is something that we have to advance forward. It is also something that we have to also nurture, but also to support our survivors, because they want that hope. They need to find peace and joy, and to be reconnected with who they are, to really be able to support. And they need to be supported too, reciprocally. Yes.
Very well said. I think we're going to open it up to questions. I would imagine you would have a lot of questions for the people sitting up here on this panel. And I would urge you to come and stand at one of the microphones. There's one over there, and then there's one in the center. So you go to the microphone, please. Oh, I know. You got to go to the microphone. And then we could all hear your questions. Miigwech. It's right behind you. Yep, that one there. Form an orderly line. Thank you. Okay, here we go.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Gahandineta, Mohawk Mothers. We're now in the Supreme Court on this very issue. And I live in Kahnawake, which is in the so-called province of Quebec. And I just want to tell you that denialism is dangerous. It's getting more and more dangerous for us. And I'll just give you 5 instances in the last 2 weeks of denialism. They've passed laws that people cannot speak English. They say, oh, they allow some of the native people to speak English, but they won't speak English to us. I went to, all the lights went out in Kahnawake. We couldn't find anybody in Hydro-Quebec that would answer the calls. And finally, I had to have somebody in Montreal to call them for me to report that the lights had gone out. And so I was on the phone and we talked with and nobody, they had no knowledge of what had happened in our community. It could have been 40 below zero, but there was nobody that would take our call. They would say, oh, press 9 and somebody will talk to you. And then it just goes off. The hospitals, you go in the hospitals, you can't find hardly anybody that will speak to you, although they say we're allowed to use our Mohawk language or speak in English because we don't speak French. And then we go to the clinics. I went to the clinic, this is in the last 2 weeks. Not too long ago, about 10 days ago, I had to go to the clinic for an appointment, medical thing, and nobody would speak to me there. They just told me to sit down, and I had an appointment. Then I caught somebody else. Finally, I had to call somebody in who lives in the town nearby, who speaks French, and she came in and she helped me And she said she was shocked at how I was being treated. I'm giving you a story about myself. And you go into the stores, you try to pay for something you've purchased, they won't talk to you in English. And you have to, it's no use reading any signs because all the signs are in French. We don't know what's on those signs. I went to Services Canada because I needed some help on all the material that they send to us from the government in French. And they know we don't speak French. So I went there to get some help, just to get a word, just to find out who do I call to get some help. And the woman sitting there, she had a big sign behind her saying English, but she looked at me. I said, it says right there, you're supposed to speak English to me if I ask for it. And so she asked me to show her some ID to see if I really was a native person. So I did something really stupid. I thought, well, cheer her up a little bit. I pulled out a $20 bill and I showed her the picture of Queen Elizabeth and I said, is this good enough? And she got so... She became so angry that she didn't serve me. She wouldn't serve me. And all I wanted was a translation of this document that was sent to me. I wanted to know who do I call to get in touch, to get some service, some help. Mm-hmm. So I'm just telling you of some of the things that have happened to us. And oh yes, and there was a recent meeting of our people in Montreal to talk about saving our languages. And who do you think shows up? The premier of the province, who informs them that what they really need to learn is to speak French because you are on our land, the land of Quebec. Yes, that's what they did. So, but when we got down to it, we talked about it, we said, you know what this is all about? It's all about our land. It's our land. And until they find a way to turn it over to themselves, they're going to keep giving us trouble. Yes.
So well said.
And I thank you very much for listening to me.
Oh,
there's more.
Miigwech. Miigwech, it's that racism runs deep, right? That you see it all through bureaucratic systems and forms of government, and it's a constant. We're constantly combating that. Number two, and microphone number two, if you would state who you are and your question, please, for the panel.
Hi, Hari Bandara Hunzu, Terry Lugi, Saadni. Terry Lugi, I am from Stalatan First Nation. I work for Watan Indian Band, and I work around the Lejac Indian Residential School as the project manager. Thank you so much to the panel. Your reference to racism is a perfect lead-in to my question. I know we've all experienced denialism. And I guess part of me is, it's like denialism isn't even strong enough for me. The hurt and the harm that it caused to myself and all of our survivors is horrible. It's horrible. And crying in that, the council chambers in Quesnel with all of our survivors gathered together with that book and all of that yuckiness. Anyways, back to the R word. Again, I don't think denialism is strong enough. I think what is beneath all of that is racism. Plain and simple, it is racism. Of course, there's denialism around residential schools, but all across this country, the Jewish community, the Muslim community experience blatant racism. So it's not just us, but how does the panel, address racism beneath all of this? It is what drives this in my mind.
Good. It's so true. Who would like to take this first? Sean?
Sure, I could try. I mean, thank you so much for your comment. I think in terms of the point that denialism seems like not a strong enough word, I think we do need to understand, as you're saying, at root, that a core component of denialism is the promotion of anti-Indigenous hatred and racism. Absolutely. And that we need to understand also that racism for non-Indigenous people, the way that racism works is it's both an offensive, it's a dehumanization of Indigenous people, but it's also a defensive. There's a defensive aspect to racism. It's about self-preservation as well. The dehumanization justifies unearned privilege. In the case of the Quesnel situation, for those of you who are following, you could really see how that was being used as a form of racism, as an attack, but also as a way of defending. And so I think that anti-Indigenous racism is at the very foundation of denialism. Those who are seeking, if we think about it as a form of genocide denial, what's being called into question is Canada's myths of benevolence, right? And that can be deeply uncomfortable. And sometimes the way that denialists protect themselves is engaging in racism to dehumanize, to justify. And so we see it working in a cycle that way. And so I hope that in the conversations to come, particularly in how we address this, that racism is at the core of how we address this moving forward. Thank you.
Miigwech.
Cook's Jam. There's a couple of things that I wanted to mention in regards to denialism. Yes, it is very racist and can be very racist, and it does hurt. And there's a lot of things that needs to be done to be able to stand up to that. And to me, I see it also as, as part of that hope. I also see it as part of that path forward that's going to be able to support survivors, but also all of us. And, I know that it was shared with me that our NDP MP, Leah Gazan, she did a presentation yesterday, and she's putting forth an amendment to the criminal code. And it's with her private members bill of the C-413, which would have residential school denialism included in hate crime. And that would change and will target anyone who is willfully misrepresenting well-documented historical facts that promote hate against Indigenous peoples, and also with the intention of targeting survivors, families, and communities. But that too also includes, the foundation of racism. And I agree with MP Leah Gazan. Survivors, families, and communities have a right to be protected, as well as our children and our grandchildren. So there is hope, and I want to start by acknowledging the survivors that are also in this room. To me, we have to stand up to racism. We have to be able to support, and that's some of the political will at other levels that are supporting to drive this forward in a meaningful and impactful way.
Miigwech. And I know there's lots of people that have questions, and we have to have one question left before we all get thrown off the stage. And it's going to be to you because I made you go to the microphone. So please let us know who you are and your question. Miigwech.
Bonjour. Bonjour, Nunamagantuk. From Laxall First Nation, Northwestern Ontario. I just want to share a bit why I'm here. I'm here because I lost 6 aunts at Pelican Lake Residential School. And I lost siblings there too, on top of that. So I'm a sole survivor in that family. Back in the day, we had large families. We had families had 14 kids, 17 kids. You know, we had large families. All these children went to Pelican Lake Residential School. And so my question is denialism. And there are some burial grounds that we've been approaching. Is the Solacot Indian Hospital. We've been denied that we can search that area for burial grounds, unmarked burial grounds. And also the sanatorium in Fort William First Nation. I'm in Fort William. Before it was Center Bay, there was a sanatorium that where our people were sent. So there's got to be burial grounds in that sanatorium. You know, since we have burial grounds around residential schools, I think those areas should be searched. We shouldn't be denied to search those areas. You know, we have that right to know where our burials are. You know, I don't know where my siblings are buried. I don't know where my aunties are buried. So but we're in a process. We're going to release a report. November, sometime mid-November, about the findings that took place at the search site at Pelican Lake. But we also asked for Indian Hospital, his own hospital, to search for burial grounds, but we were denied that. So this is total denialism. I understand that denialism to me is a crime. It is a crime. It's not something that's a very, very soft word for me to bring it up, but it is a crime. Part of that denialism around it is racism and discrimination, you know. And the next question I wanna in 2012, Laxaw First Nation and Catholic First Nation searched for two boys that were missing in 1956. And that's 56 years later, two boys were missing. And so with the help, without technology, we had the help of an elder, a spiritual elder that told us where to find those two missing boys, burials. Not burials, but where they're missing, where they died. One corner in a clearing, he said there's one clear area in one corner, clearing area, you'll find one. On the other side of that, this corner here, at that distance, you'll find another remains here. So we worked there about 3 weeks to find those remains. And it was I would say the expertise of our people, the guidance of a spiritual elder that we found those in, we put them in a cart box. And we did a blessing in that area. And not only that, we searched the whole ground area in Pelican Lake, especially on the east shore area. And we did find some burials there. But you know, we didn't want to go public with this because everybody be storming our way when we do the search and disrupting our search. This is our own initiative. Two First Nations leaders were involved in this, and our people are involved with this to support the people that lost two boys, their two sons, relatives. So our first search, 2012, where we had all the equipment, we had everything. And you know, the police came there after. The OPP came after us, and somebody must inform that there's a bunch of First Nations people wandering around the bush here, the roadsides, you know. They're trying to interfere our search process. But we phoned police chief in Solacot, and we asked him about his troops being in that area, and he came over and told him to get out of the way he told the troops that this is our one initiative, not theirs. I had no right to interfere with our search process. So it's been a while. It's been a while. We've been so we did. They did take home the burials and another burial site at proper burial site at community where the boys came from. So my other question is denialism. My last question is if we wanted to be real on this denialism and educate the public, we should do it at the airports. Put on every information about every child matters. Even on the planes, put them on the logo on the planes. You know, WestJet, Porter Air Canada. Let's educate these people being in denial. You know, that's what I want to share, and because.
Miigwech. Yeah.
Miigwech, thank you, Miigwech. And I would like to set this in Ojibwe, but I know you guys don't speak Ojibwe.
I know, and he knows that because he says "Mino kishkib" to me every morning to tell me that means good morning. Thank you very much, Miigwech Elder Fred Kijik from Lac-Seul First Nation. Miigwech, you know, it's a very good point. You raised such a good point there, right? I mean, this is the ultimate form of racism that we cannot, and denialism, you know, call it out for what it is. It is racism, and the fact is that we cannot get the government of Canada to search our hospitals, our Indian hospitals, you know, beyond the grounds of Indian residential schools, and it's that is the ultimate form of denialism, isn't it? The country won't still deal with this. Even though the woman who's at number 2, Leah Gazin, our Winnipeg Centre MP for the NDP, she put forward the genocide motion that received resounding unanimous consent like a few years ago. And Canada agreed to it, yet still doesn't agree to many things. And Donald Worm is standing beside me saying, what should we do? Can we let Leah speak? Or Don, you're the one that's going to call this. Yes? Okay. There's another presentation that's on its way, and they're ready to go. So, no, she's shaking her head at me, Lee. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But everyone go support Lee's bill and support all of her work, because she does the heavy lifting in the House of Parliament for all of us. Miigwech.